Hi friends, welcome to Bronx Tales with your host, Bronxy B, and me, I'm Logan. Guys, we have a lot to discuss with the new ISP document drop, so let's just get into it. Before we get into the ISP document drop that now again leaves us with more questions than answers, I do want to talk about the interview that was recently done on Birdie's channel with Birdie, who interviewed Dot. And if you don't remember who Dot is the person who said that they were standing outside the morning of the 13th and witnessed some people outside smoking marijuana on the back porch, specifically, possibly Dee, Emma Bailey, Dylan, Bethany, and whoever knows who else. Now, in the beginning, some people believed this person. Many people didn't believe this person. It did come out that this person was lying. However, now in the interview with Birdie, this person says that all the information was true. It just wasn't witnessed with their own eyeballs, that they are basically telling somebody else's story that is too scared to come forward or doesn't want to come forward. I'll leave it up to you to believe what you want to believe. For me, once somebody lies, it's game over. I don't believe a word that comes out of their mouth. So take it with a grain of salt. I personally think that some of the information that's given by Dot could possibly fit and it could possibly make sense. I do just struggle to believe anything now that it has come out that they were not the one who witnessed the people out back or was even there that morning. Specifically, Dot speaks on the angle that it was officers involved in the crime that happened, because there was an officer involved with Kaylee specifically. Dot says that Kaylee freely slept around and was sleeping with a married officer. That angle could possibly make sense if you think about the cop car, the undercover cop car that is driving in the area that night that they want to claim as Brian Koberger's car. However, with Pav and Mark B and everybody else proving that the time frame actually fits with it being the Ford Fusion, which is the undercover cop car, it would make sense then why they're in that area, right? And all the other police contact that happened. The officer involved theory also fits with Dylan saying she heard somebody say, "It's okay, I'm here to help you." I suppose if an officer was in your house in the middle of the night and you were confused and didn't know what was going on, and an officer said to you, "It's okay, I'm going to help you," you would probably believe them. And that's possibly what happened in this situation. Again, everything is alleged in our opinion, but it could possibly fit.
Kaylee was a person that she was very free in her dating. I want to say this in a very nice way. I want to be very respectful to her. Like, she was a person that was very freelance and who she dated and who she slept with, and one of the people that she was sleeping with was an MPD officer, and that is kind of what started a lot of this of a snowball of what happened. First it was that, and then there was like events that kept going on after that, and after that they kept getting to that boiling point.
So there's been people that have theorized that, and I see people in the chat, they're like, "Bro, be direct." I'm trying to be as direct as I can with also coming up with these questions on the spot here, right? So that wouldn't be the first time that a lot of people have heard that. Like, what made you decide that that's the working theory?
Right, because okay, so I don't know if you're familiar with, there is people identified like a suicide attempt on a frat. A guy, they said it was like kind of like a drowning incident, but it was
Hudson.
Yeah. So basically, Kaylee, she was a sleuther, and she had been a sleuther. Like, she was looking into this missing person that she had called into the police, thinking that she seen this missing person. She was somebody that was looking into things. So she was dating this cop from the MPD, and she was telling this cop that like she didn't believe that it was like a suicide. She believed that like it was like a hazing incident that went wrong, and it was actually a murder. And so what, like, while she was dating this officer, like, not only was he like cheating on his wife, but then like she was trying to discover this thing, you know, that was going on, and was like going to him. And I think that the tension that kept happening, like, between like, okay, like if she finds out that like this really was a murder, and then everything else, like, not only is my whole world gonna fall apart, but like all of these other things are gonna fall apart. So like it kept intensifying, and I think that it took it to a point where he was like, I have no choice. Like, it's my career and my family, and then also like covering up, like not wanting the media or people to like understand that like there was a murder. Because if we say like there's a murder in the frats, like what are people gonna think? They're gonna think like, holy shit, like I'm not gonna come here. Like I don't want my son or my daughter, my kid to be involved in that. So like he had the pressure of that, and like the night of the grub truck, Kaylee that was messaging the cop and was like, it like she had like liquid courage. She was intoxicated and was probably saying things that she shouldn't have said, and was like explaining like, I believe this is what happened. And I feel like he had, in my opinion, he had like an intense fear with like, I'm gonna be exposed for having this affair, and then like I have this girl coming to me about this, and I'm trying to keep hidden.
And then we get into the angle of, listen, if you want to ruin your life, tell on an officer for doing something wrong, which might be why Dylan specifically was scared to come forward or scared to tell the truth. I'm pretty sure that both Dylan and Bethany were threatened to not tell the truth, which is even more interesting if you connect the fact that it could have been an officer saying that rather than just a regular frat guy or person or whatever that was involved in this case. It also makes sense why the two eyewitnesses cannot pick out Bryan Kohberger as the person they saw. Both of them were within a couple of feet of the person who committed this crime or people who committed this crime, and neither one of them can say, yes, that was the person I saw. Bryan Kohberger is the person I saw. Neither one of them can say that. And I would also think that the last thing Molly McMichael would want to do is identify an officer being in the area that night, especially because she does and sells rugs. I'm sure she wouldn't want to tell on an officer because surely that would ruin her life. She would probably get raided over and over, pulled over and over, and probably go to jail over and over had she identified an officer as being the person that she saw that night. Now, Dot spoke on an angle where she thought maybe the officer thought that Kaylee was pregnant. And although obviously she wasn't, and I didn't really think that was true. However, we do have several redactions in the bathroom area of the crime scene photos. Some people thought it was just tampons being redacted. Others thought maybe it was pregnancy tests being redacted.
You know, and then there was rumors that possibly that she was taking pregnancy tests, and I don't know if she was pregnant, but like maybe he felt like that was the last straw. Like, okay, like now, like if she's pregnant, like my whole house of cards is gonna fall down. So like, you know, in his panic, I think that he had intentions to just go in there and to like maybe just kind of like threaten, but like things got out of control. You know what I mean? Like he went in there and it was to threaten, you know, Kaylee, but he didn't know that Maddie was in the room. So he's doing that, and then like they say, like Xana comes up and is like, what's going on? So like originally, like, okay, I was only here for one person. I didn't know the other person was in the room. Now somebody's coming up, so like now I have like this whole other thing that I have to deal with. You know, and I think that like after that, like they cleaned up and they were getting ready to get out and go about. And when they did, they seen Dylan, but they had already cleaned up and like already had everything put together. So like if they were to go and be like, oh my God, now we have another person, they had already cleaned up. So like they wouldn't have had extra clothes to deal with Dylan too. It would have been a whole other thing. So it'd have been easier to just be like, hey Dylan, you know what? Shut the fuck up. Don't say a thing. If you say anything about us or anything you've seen, like, we're going to come for you. And that's why Dylan was so distraught and was so, like, all over the place with what she said, because yeah, she was lying, but it wasn't really her fault. But she still was like, I don't know what to say, so I have to like come up with something like somebody's passed out, like, because I can't say that like this happened, you know. And there's rumors that Bethany wasn't even at the house. She didn't even come to the house till later. So like it would make complete sense that Dylan would be like, okay, you know what? I don't know what to fucking do. I'm going to wait until the morning and then I'm going to message Bethany and be like, I don't know what to do. What the fuck just happened? Like, I don't know how to handle this. And then Bethany comes over and then they're like, okay, we're going to have somebody else call. Like, you know what I mean? So it was like, it was negligent, but it was also, you know, her trying to do the best she can do, you know, like with what she had.
That also goes into the Murphy angle. She said that Murphy was under the desk when the officers came in, but when the officers came in that day after the crime, Murphy didn't bark at them or make any sudden movements or get scared. She said that he was really comfortable around those officers. And she thought maybe that's because Murphy knew the scent of the officers from having relations with Kaylee. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think Murphy was exhausted. I think he was terrified. And Murphy was hiding. He just witnessed his owner being unalived in a horrific way. I also don't really agree with that angle for the fact that we hear Murphy barking for 45 minutes or longer straight that night. Now, it could have been because of what was going on with Murphy's owner, but if she wants to use the angle that Murphy was comfortable with the perpetrator, then that wouldn't really fit because Murphy did bark for a very long time that night. It could have been due to the violence, but it also could have been due to not knowing who was in the house and not being comfortable with the person in the house. I tend to believe it's probably because of the violence that he was barking, because they said, the roommate said, and everybody else said that Murphy's not a barker. So we know that Murphy started barking when he saw the perpetrators and the violence started happening. But she can't really use the angle of Murphy being comfortable with the officers, and that's why he wasn't barking when they came in the next day, because he was barking that night.
He was there for Kaylee because he was seeing Kaylee, so it was normal for him to be there. And then when he comes to the crime scene, Murphy is not even there. He doesn't even budge at that. He was very comfortable with the officers. I think he was comfortable with the officers because he had to grow accustomed to knowing their smell and knowing who they were, you know, so he was accustomed to it. That's why the dog didn't freak out and he was like compliant with that, is because the officer was already over there because, you know, he was sleeping with Kaylee.
Either way, the interview is really interesting. I'll have it linked in my description box below if you want to check it out. I would sure go give it a listen. Even though a lot of the things I don't think are true, you still can pull information from what Dot is saying in the interview. She does talk about the Kopacka angle, and I do have to say, whether you believe it or not, I think that Kopacka was going to be the patsy to begin with. And I really think that after the fact that they unalived Kopacka and staged his apartment to make it look like Kopacka snapped because he had mental issues and was a veteran, and they were going to use that angle to make it look like Kopacka snapped and committed this horrific crime. They unalived Kopacka, but they had his apartment set up to make it look like he snapped. And let's not forget Judge accidentally saying Kopacka's name in a court hearing with Brian Kohberger, which was in a completely different state and completely different county. How would Judge know anything about Brent Kopacka? I want to move on and look at Jules's video from, I believe it was last night. She goes into some of the ISP documents, specifically some of the dates regarding IGG and Brian Koberger's name. We all know Payne lies. Payne has lied in previous cases and has actually gotten in trouble for it. We all know Chief Fry made up a position for Payne to take to move him up in the ranks. Fry literally invented a position for Payne for this crime to be his right-hand man. And we know Payne is a liar. So somebody, anybody, please tell us how Payne had Brian Koberger's name in a report on December 5th of 2022 when supposedly they didn't get his name through IGG until December 19th of 2022.
That just is what it is. Okay, so here's where it says suspect first, okay? Suspect is checked, the name is redacted, all right? And this is from 12/5/22 as well. But you're gonna see that it's like that from all of the receipts after the knife sheath, okay? Suspect, receipt, 11/28, all right? Suspect, receipt, 11/22. Suspect, 11/21. And then we have suspect again for 11/18. Now we're going to have just the victims' names for 11/16. And the only thing that they received from 11/16 was the K-bar, okay? So after they got this K-bar, they then have a suspect with a blanked out name. But then you go to page 27 after they've received more information, and now we have the blanked out name with Brian Koberger now listed secondary on 12/5/2022. If his name is being listed as a secondary for 12/5/2022, there's really only like two things in my mind that this could mean. That they lied to us about when they actually did get the information because they would have known about him before 12/19, because this is all being signed off on by Blaker, okay? Now, she did ask specifically Brett Payne. But the questions that she asks and the way that she asks it makes it seem as if there was nothing in there. Plus, they've said this also in court before. There's nothing in any tips received on 12/19/22 that they've gone back in and tracked everything. They never got anything from WSU. Remember the parking thing, the love sheets or whatever that had all the cars on it from that night? They looked in the system and then they saw the car in the parking lot, all right? That was never sent over to the police, and they've told us this themselves because Koberger's vehicle did not match what they were looking for. They pulled him up, they saw his information in the system, but they never sent it over to the police. So even though the date of that was what, 11/29? Was that 11/29? It's been so long since I looked at it. I think it was 11/29. They never sent it over. So even that tip was not in the system prior to 12/19/22. So either they lied about that or Brian Koberger's DNA is showing up somewhere else besides the knife sheath. Because the way that they have this listed as if the blanked out name is DNA that came from the knife sheath because the knife sheath was the first thing that was received. I can't figure any other way to look at that. So when we go to the rule, if you look at the rule, this is the one that I've been talking about forever now, okay? Well, this is the rule right here that I've been talking about. Idaho Criminal Rule 16, Discovery and Inspection. If you go down to B, for disclosure of evidence and materials by the prosecution on written request, they never remove number 2. It is listed as 1-8 down to police reports. Stops there. They never remove number 2. And number 2 is about a co-defendant. Statement of a co-defendant. On written request of a defendant, the prosecuting attorney must permit the defendant to inspect and copy or photograph and basically all the information. Why would they still cite it like that? Why wouldn't it be 1,3-8? It matters.
How did they have Brian Koberger's name on December 5th? How? From where? Somebody tell us. In the past, Payne has lied about body-worn camera. In this case, Payne has lied about the bloody black glove in the front yard. He's lied about the knife sheath because according to ISP, they're the ones who found it. He's lied about Bryan Kohberger's name, where it came from, and what date. So we all know Payne cannot be trusted. Not a word that he says. He has 2 reports out there that contradict each other, and he wrote both of them. And let's not forget, Payne now works for the University of Idaho. Speaking of the University of Idaho, one of my favorite subscribers named Fizzy sent me this in my email the other day. This is regarding Scott Green, the president of University of Idaho. I just want you to check out the 3rd line that comes up. Weird, right? Ironic, right? Coincidence? Probably not. So now let's talk about the infamous sheath. You know, I really thought when we got pictures of the sheath, if we ever got pictures of the sheath, that it might answer some of our questions. And of course, in this case, it's just creating more questions than answers. But I think I might have found something interesting regarding the knife sheath itself. For 3 years, almost 3 years, we've been told that Bryan Kohberger's trace DNA, less than a secondary transfer amount of DNA, was found on the female part of the button snap on the knife sheath. The female part of that's oddly specific, right? That's oddly specific for it to not be where they found Bryan Kohberger's DNA. Apparently, now in these new ISP reports, they found Bryan Kohberger's trace DNA, less than a secondary transfer amount of DNA, on the strap, on the back side of the strap that leads to the button of the knife sheath. I swear I've heard it in interviews. I swear I've heard it from officers themselves that it was on the button snap of the knife sheath. So why now are we learning just now that that's not where it was found? It was found on the leathery, worn part of the strap of the knife sheath. So strange. Is it something now that they're trying to change the narrative of? That I don't know, but it's weird that we're being lied to about oddly specific things that we can see in reports. Like, why are you making this up? I know most people are talking about the knife sheath itself and the way it looks, and how some people have said it's actually a nothing burger, and I very much disagree with that. I think this knife sheath tells us something, and I think that it's something that many people probably won't find or point out, but you can get it over here. Check out the spatter. You can barely see it. It's really small, but check out the spatter on the knife sheath. You guys know that I'm really into spatter, right? It tells us so much. It can almost solve the crime for us. I mean, it can tell us the direction where the person was compared to where it landed, the velocity, how big the tail is, where it came from. But spatter can also tell us possibly what type of weapon was used, how close the person was to the object that has the spatter on it, if it's gravity drops or not. Spatter tells us a lot of information. So I want to point your guys' attention here to the very fine mist that we see on the knife sheath. You don't get mist pattern from a sharp force injury. Do you know where you get mist blood spatter pattern from? You get it from super high velocity wounds. Super high velocity impact is where you get fine mist blood spatter. Could it be from blunt force? It could be. But the fact that this is so tiny, that this is a mist, this isn't droplets, this isn't cast off from a knife, this is high velocity impact spatter. Do you know where that comes from? That usually 9 times out of 10 will come from a pew-pew wound. High velocity impact spatter comes 9 times out of 10 from a pew-pew wound. So all the people looking into the angles that there was a pew-pew used, And some of the other spatter tells us that a pew-pew was possibly used. And we heard from the beginning of the case that they thought the victims were rather than sharp force injuries. So I find it really, really interesting, the fine mist red fluid spatter pattern we see on the knife sheath, because to me, that tells me there was probably a pew-pew that was used, and that's where that pattern came from. That fine mist, that's where you'll see that, is from a pew-pew. So now I want to turn your attention to the pink and green jacket and the heart blanket that was recovered from Dylan's bedroom. Now, we were told that red fluid was found on this, and from what I gathered, it was a very small amount of red fluid that was found on these objects. However, if you look at these pictures, that is not a small amount of red fluid, you guys. That is a lot. That is a very decent amount of red fluid on the jacket specifically. Now, what's interesting is law enforcement gave these items back to Dylan. It wasn't until Ann Taylor asked for these two pieces of evidence, then did officers have to drive all the way to Dylan's house and get them back from her. Why were they trying to hide these items? Dylan Mortensen had these two items in her room that has quite a bit of red fluid on it, yet it wasn't tested? Whose DNA is on Dylan Mortensen's items? And then Dylan wants to claim she's never seen the jacket before. Yeah, I would probably say that too if they found red fluid on a jacket of mine in my bedroom after a quadruple homicide. I just find this particularly interesting. You have more red fluid on items connected to the roommate, specifically Dylan, than you do the person who's serving 4 life sentences plus 10 years. Wild, wild. And then as I'm reading these documents, I find out that not only do they find all this stuff, but they didn't even take fingerprints from the roommates until well over a week later. Well over a week after the crime had happened. You would think the only people in the house at the time that the victims were unalived, you would think you would grab their prints and even DNA when you talk to them in the interview room the same day. I don't know what these people were thinking. I don't know if this is a botched investigation or if this was planned, but I'm really, really leaning towards the fact that this was all planned out. This was planned out long before. This could have even been planned out before it freaking happened. They had everybody on lineup, ready to go. The Kopaka didn't really work out for them, so they had to switch their plan real quick. But look, apparently it stuck. I'll never understand how we have guilters to this day. But other than that, that's what we have for you today. Do something nice for yourself. Be kind, but more importantly, be kind to your animals. Bye, guys.